My name doesn't matter now. What matters is that I worked alone in the municipal morgue of Cedar Falls, Iowa, a cold basement beneath St. Mary's Hospital. Shift from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. 7 years doing this. 7 years choosing to be with the dead instead of the living. People always asked, "How do you put up with it?" I always replied with the same joke, "The dead don't complain about their pay, but the truth?" The truth is, I preferred their silence. I preferred the pungent smell of formaldehyde and industrial disinfectant to the false perfume of sympathy. I preferred cold white tiled walls and buzzing fluorescent lights to yet another empty conversation about the weather. The cold storage room had 12 stainless steel drawers. Each one had an identification label, controlled temperature, and a constant ventilation system. The procedure was simple: receive, register, store, release. I didn't perform autopsies. I just kept everything organized until the coroner arrived in the morning. It was a cataloging job, the bureaucracy of death. But in that November, something changed. The hospital administration decided to cut costs. Energy saving. The order was clear: turn off all lights in unused areas after midnight. It seemed simple, but I had never worked in the morgue in complete darkness before. There were always bodies arriving. There was always movement. That was the first week in years that no new bodies arrived for 3 days in a row. 3 days of absolute silence. The first night I had to turn off the lights. I hesitated. My hand lingered on the switch for almost a full minute. Something inside me screamed, "Don't do it." But I ignored it. After all, what could happen? They were just bodies. Inert flesh. Controlled decomposition chemistry. I hung up. The darkness was instant and dense. Only a faint red emergency light flickered in the hallway, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The hum of the refrigerators grew louder. Or perhaps it was just the silence amplifying everything. I stood there in the darkness, listening to my own breathing. And then I heard another one. It was a low sound, moist, rhythmic. Like when you're in a quiet room and you can hear someone breathing in the dark. That heavy, almost gasping breath of someone who's fast asleep. But I was alone. Absolutely alone. My first instinct was to rationalize. It's the ventilation system. It has to be. 12 refrigerated drawers working simultaneously create air pressure, create sounds, old pipes. This hospital was built in the 60s. Everything here creaks, whistles, breathes. But the sound didn't stop. And worse, it was moving. It started near the drawers on the left, next to the cracked tile wall. Then it seemed to glide across the room, around the metal countertop in the center, circling around where I stood, completely still. My heart pounding so hard I could feel my pulse in my throat. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. The sound was wet, as if there were liquid in the lungs of whoever was breathing, as if they were slowly drowning, but still trying to suck in air. My hand groped along the wall until I found the light switch. I turned on the lights. The bright, violent light blinded me for a second. I blinked several times until my eyes adjusted. I looked around. Everything was exactly as it should be. The 12 drawers were closed. The labels were in their places. The floor was clean. The counter was empty. The transport cart was leaning against the wall. Absolute silence. Just the constant hum of the refrigerators. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my heart. I went to the computer terminal and checked the list of stored bodies. 4 in the cold storage. Drawer 3, Mr. Howard Jennings, 78 years old, natural death. Drawer 5, Mrs. Patricia Cole, 81 years old, stroke. Drawer 9, Daniel Reeves, 34 years old, car accident. Drawer 7, unidentified, approximately 40 years old, cause of death undetermined. Everyone registered, everyone where they should be. I opened drawer 7 just to be sure. The body was there, pale skin with liver mortis stains, Eyes closed, mouth tightly shut, cold, rigid, dead. I closed the drawer slowly, the metallic sound echoing through the empty room. I looked at my hands. They were trembling. I spent the rest of the night with all the lights on, drinking cold coffee and trying to convince myself that I'd imagined it all. Tired, stressed. Maybe I needed a vacation. But when my shift ended and I went up the stairs to the exit, I noticed something. My breathing was labored, heavy, wet, exactly like the sound I had heard in the dark. I tried to avoid it. I swear I tried. For the next 2 nights, I kept all the lights on. I ignored emails from management about energy consumption. I ignored the note my supervisor left on my desk. Cutting costs is not optional. But on the 5th night, he came down in person. He turned off the circuit breakers in the hallway. He said that if I didn't follow protocol, there would be consequences. So I was left with no choice. Midnight. I turned the lights off again. This time, the breathing began immediately. It didn't wait. It didn't hesitate. It was as if it had been waiting for me. As if it knew I would return to the darkness. And it was higher, closer. I stood still in the center of the room, my eyes slowly adjusting to the reddish dimness of the emergency light. My own breath was caught in my throat. I didn't want to make a sound. I didn't want them to know where I was. But then I heard something else. Metal scraping metal. It came from inside the cold storage room. A sharp, prolonged sound, like fingernails, or something worse, scratching the inner surface of a steel drawer, scratching, pausing, scratching again. Louder, more desperately. My body froze. Every fiber of my being screamed to turn on the lights, to run away, to never come back. But I couldn't move. I stood there, paralyzed, listening to that horrible sound echo through the darkness. And then it stopped. Silence. I counted to 10 in my head. I took a deep breath. I turned on the lights. All the drawers were closed, exactly as I had left them. But something was different. I went to drawer number 7. The label was slightly crooked. I always kept everything perfectly aligned. Always. It was part of my routine, my way of maintaining control. I straightened the label with trembling fingers and opened the drawer. The body of the unidentified man was there. Cold, motionless. But her mouth was slightly open. I was absolutely certain that it was closed the last time I looked. I remembered it clearly. Mouth closed, jaw stiff from rigor mortis. Now there was a half-centimeter gap, as if something had forced the lips apart. From the inside, I placed my gloved hand near his mouth, just to make sure he was crazy, that he was imagining things. The air was warm, not as cold as it should be. Lukewarm, almost hot. I slammed the drawer shut so hard it echoed like a gunshot. I went to the computer and logged into the system. Possible failure in the cooling system of drawer 7. Request urgent maintenance. But I knew that wasn't it. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the plastic chair near the door, staring at the drawers, waiting for something to happen. Nothing happened. But when my shift ended and I went home, I noticed something as I locked the morgue door. My breathing was synchronized with that sound I had heard in the dark. Inhale, exhale, wet, heavy. It felt like my lungs were full of something that shouldn't be there. On Friday night, I made a decision. If I was going crazy, I needed to know. If there was something there, something real, I also needed to know. I couldn't continue living in this limbo between sanity and terror, between logic and the impossible. So I did something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. I turned off the lights, and I stood there, waiting. Darkness swallowed me as it always did. But this time I didn't try to turn the light back on. I stood there in the center of the room, breathing slowly, forcing my body to remain calm even as every instinct screamed at me to run. Breathing began. But now I paid attention. I really listened. And I realized something that chilled me to the bone. She was in sync with me. When I inhaled, the sound inhaled along with me. When I held my breath, the sound also stopped. When I exhaled slowly, the other sound did the same, that moist, gurgling sound, like lungs full of fluid trying to function. I did a test. I held my breath completely. The sound continued. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't my imagination. It was something separate from me, something that breathed independently, something that was there in the dark with me. And then I felt it, a presence. Not a sound, not a movement, just that primal feeling your reptilian brain recognizes when you're not alone, when you're being watched, when something is too close. The air around me grew colder, not gradually, suddenly, as if something had sucked all the heat away in a single instant. My courage crumbled. I ran to the light switch and turned the lights on so hard I almost broke the button. I blinked against the harsh light. I looked around, my heart pounding in my chest. And I froze. All the drawers were open, all 12, wide open. The metal doors hung at impossible angles, like gaping mouths, but the bodies were still inside, motionless, pale, dead, except that it shouldn't be possible. The drawers had internal security locks. You needed deliberate force to open them. And all at once, impossible. I staggered backward, my legs almost giving way. My mind tried to process, tried to find a rational explanation, but there was none. And then I saw, on the identification counter, in the center of the room, where I left the new labels for arriving bodies, there was one label that hadn't been there before. A handwritten label, irregular, shaky handwriting, as if whoever wrote it was in a hurry, or dying. I walked over to her as if in a trance. I picked up the tag with numb fingers. Yes, Marcelo Augusto Silva, age, 34 years cause, undetermined awaiting release my name, my full name, my exact age. And below, a date handwritten in red ink, today's date. I dropped the tag. I ran out of the morgue without turning off the lights, without closing the drawers, without looking back. I climbed the stairs, tripping over my own feet, pushing the emergency door so hard that the alarm went off. But I didn't care. I just ran. I arrived home before dawn. I locked all the doors, all the windows. I closed the curtains. I sat on the living room floor with the lights on, hugging my knees, trying to understand what had happened. Someone was playing a trick on me. It had to be that, a macabre prank. Someone had access to the morgue. Someone knew my full name. Someone wanted to scare me. But the security cameras, the cameras always recorded everything. I called my supervisor in the morning, made up some excuse about a family emergency. He didn't seem to care. I stayed locked up at home for 3 days. 3 days without sleeping properly, waking up sweating, checking my own breathing, putting my hand on my chest just to feel my heart beating, proving to myself that I was still alive. But the thoughts wouldn't stop. What if I checked the cameras? What if I saw who had done it? I needed to know. I needed answers. I went back to the hospital on Monday, not to work, just to pick up my things. They had already found a temporary replacement. I went down to the morgue one last time. The room was silent, normal. All the drawers were closed. Everything was in its place, as if nothing had happened. I looked at drawer number 7. It was empty. The door was ajar, no label. I looked for the supervisor. He was in the hallway checking reports. "The body from drawer 7?" I asked, my voice coming out weaker than I intended. The unidentified man. "When was he released?" He looked at me with a confused expression. "What body? Drawer 7 has been empty for 3 weeks. Don't you remember? You were the one who registered the checkout." My blood froze. Did I register it? Of course. It's all in the system. He turned the computer screen towards me. Look, November 23rd. Release authorized. Digital signature, Marcelo Silva. It was my signature, my login, my authorization. But I didn't remember doing that. Who was it? I asked, my voice almost fading. The body, who was he? The supervisor shrugged. Unidentified. We never found out. No fingerprints in the system. No DNA matches. No one reported missing, as if he never existed. I felt my legs go weak. I left without saying anything else. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, turned on the cold tap and splashed cold water on my face repeatedly, trying to wake up, trying to return to reality. I looked in the mirror. My reflection stared back at me, pale. Deep, dark circles under my eyes, cracked lips. And then I realized my hands were freezing, too cold. I put my fingers on my neck, searching for my pulse. It was there, weak, but it was there. I took a deep breath, a very deep breath. But for a second, just 1 second, I didn't feel the air going in. I felt only the cold, damp weight in my lungs, as if they were already full of something that shouldn't be there. I left the hospital and never went back. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet and dark, I can still hear it. That breath, wet, heavy, rhythmic, and I don't know anymore if it's mine. If you listen to the end, you're already one of us. Something happened to me, and to this day, I can't understand it. I work in the morgue at St. Mary's Hospital in Portland, Oregon. The graveyard shift. From 11 at night until 7 in the morning. It's just me, the flashing fluorescent lights, and the dead bodies. Nobody wants this shift. Nobody can stand it for long. I've been doing it for 3 years already. It's not about the money. It's about the silence. After the divorce, silence became the only thing I could bear. No questions, no pitying glances, no, "How are you?" Down here, 2 floors below the hospital, nobody expects anything from me. The dead don't judge. They don't speak. They don't demand. Or at least, that's what I thought. The routine is always the same. I receive the bodies that arrive during the early morning hours. Accidents, overdoses, heart attacks, suicides. I fill out the paperwork, label them, record the time of arrival, and place each one in the cold storage. Sometimes I do the preliminary cleaning before the coroner arrives in the morning. It's mechanical, repetitive, safe. That September night, I arrived as usual. Cold coffee in hand, headphones in my pocket, the smell of disinfectant mixed with something sweet and rotten that never leaves the walls. 3 bodies were already waiting on the stretcher. 2 men, a woman, all in sealed black bags, labels hanging from the zippers. I started with the first one. A man, around 50 years old, a victim of a car accident on I-5. I opened the file, checked the information, pushed the stretcher to drawer 12. The screeching of the wheels echoed through the empty hallway. It always does. That's when I heard it. A whisper. Low. Muffled. As if it came from very far away. I stopped. I looked around. Nothing. Just the hum of the air conditioner and the pale glow of the lamps. I shook my head. Exhaustion. 3 nights in a row without proper sleep. I kept pushing the stretcher, and I heard it again. This time it's clearer. A voice coming from inside the bag. My stomach churned. I dropped the stretcher in the middle of the hallway and took 2 steps back. My heart was pounding, but my mind was trying to rationalize. Gas. It happens. Bodies release air. It makes a noise. It sounds like a voice. It's science. I took a deep breath. I approached slowly. I put my hand on the zipper of the bag. Total silence. Shelter. The man's face was pale, motionless, his eyes half closed, dead. No doubt about it. I touched his neck as a precaution, cold as marble. I closed the bag. I pushed the stretcher to the chamber, locked the drawer, and got out of there quickly. But as I walked away, I listened again. But this time, it wasn't a whisper. That was my name. For 3 nights, I tried to convince myself that I hadn't heard anything. Gas, tiredness, stress, my mind playing tricks on me. I knew all the rational explanations. I'd worked with the dead long enough to know that bodies make strange noises. They contract, they release air, they creak, but they had never had they said my name. On the 4th night, I arrived early. I decided to clean the entire morgue before the bodies arrived. I scrubbed the stretchers, washed the floor, organized the instruments, anything to keep my mind occupied, to avoid thinking. It was 12:15 a.m. The service entrance bell rang. 2 bodies, an elderly woman, natural death, a young man, overdose. I signed the form, pushed the stretchers inside. I placed the woman in drawer 7. No incident. Silence. The young man was the last one left. He must have been about 25 years old. Tattoos on his arms. Thin face. The card read, John Doe, unidentified. I pushed the stretcher to drawer 15, but before opening it, I heard, my name wasn't there this time. It was a sentence. You never told her. I stopped breathing. Those words, they were impossible. Nobody knew. Nobody. It was something I'd kept for 7 years. A secret I'd take to the grave. Literally. And now, it was being whispered from inside a body bag. My hands were trembling. I pressed my ear to the bag. Slowly. Afraid of what I might hear. Silence. So, again. Clearer. Closer. You never told her about that night. My blood froze. I recoiled. My back slammed against the metal wall. My breath came out rapid and ragged. I looked around. The cold storage rooms, the flickering lights, the empty hallway. No one there. No one but me. And of the dead. I opened the bag with trembling hands. The young man's face was motionless. Pale. Cold. Dead. No signs of life. No movement. But I had heard perfectly. I closed the bag. I locked the drawer. I ran up the stairs to the parking lot. I needed air. I needed to think. I stood there for 20 minutes. I smoked 2 cigarettes, even though I'd quit a year ago. My mind was racing. Was I going crazy? Had the isolation finally broken me? I came back. I finished my shift automatically. But every time I passed near the cold storage rooms, I was listening. Whispers. Fragmented words, always about me, always things that nobody should know. On the 5th night, 4 bodies arrived. On the 6th, 5. And each of them whispered something different. Memories, secrets, things I had done, things I had thought, things I had hidden. On the 7th day, I stopped sleeping, because I realized something worse. The voices didn't come from just any body. They came only from those who did not yet have a name, from John and Jane Does, of the unidentified, as if they were waiting. It was on the 10th night that everything changed. I could no longer pretend that everything was okay. I lost 6 kilos. My hands trembled constantly. I drank coffee all day just to avoid fainting. And even then, every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. That night, a body arrived at 2 a.m. Woman, motorcycle accident on Highway 26. Unidentified, Jane Doe. I pushed the stretcher into the hallway. Before it even stopped near the cameras, I heard the whisper, Michael. I left the stretcher in the middle of the hallway. Michael was my brother. Nobody at the hospital knew I had a brother. Nobody knew because he had died when I was 17. And I never told anyone how. My throat tightened. I approached the bag slowly, like someone approaching a bomb about to explode. Michael is still waiting. No, 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 no. I ripped open the zipper forcefully. The woman's face was destroyed by the impact, eyes closed, lifeless, dead for at least 3 hours. But the voice continued. You promised you would visit him. You promised. I closed my eyes. The guilt came like a wave. 7 years without going to the cemetery. 7 years avoiding that pain. And now, this. I locked the drawer and ran to the bathroom. I threw up. I washed my face. I looked in the mirror. My reflection looked like a ghost. I went back. I finished the procedure, but I couldn't leave. I sat in my office chair, looking at the cold storage rooms, trying to understand. That's when I remembered. Jane Doe, the woman on the motorcycle. Unidentified. I turned on the computer. I accessed the local news system. I searched for recent accidents. I found, woman dies in accident on Highway 26, identity still unknown. The news was from 3 hours ago, but below, there was an update. Update. Victim identified as Sarah Mitchell, 29 years old. My heart raced. I ran back to drawer 9. I opened it. I looked at the label on the bag. She still said Jane Doe, but now I knew her name, and the voice had stopped. I closed the drawer. I took a deep breath. I tried to process it. The voices came from the unidentified, and they stopped when those individuals were given a name. But why were they whispering things about me? I spent the rest of the night researching all the Johns and Janes does that had arrived in the last 2 weeks. I checked news, obituaries, police reports, and I discovered something that made my blood run cold. They were all, eventually, identified, but they all died before they could be found, before anyone knew they were dead, as if the voices were trapped between death and recognition, between ceasing to be someone and becoming just a body. And for some reason, they chose to speak to me. I left there at 7 in the morning. The sun was rising. The city was waking up. But I felt as if I had spent the night in a place outside of time. I arrived home. I lay down on the bed, and before going to sleep, I listened to it again. But this time, it didn't come from the morgue. It came from the next room. If you are listening to this, please believe every word. If you've listened this far, comment. I heard the whispers. I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the fact that I'd heard something coming from the empty room next door. The room that used to be Michael's. The room I'd turned into a storage room after he died. I got up. I opened the door. Stacked boxes. Dust. Nothing else. But the whisper had come from there. I'm sure of it. I spent the day trying to distract myself. I watched TV. I ate something. I took a shower. But my mind kept returning to the same place. The morgue, the voices, the unidentified people, and the question that kept haunting me. If they speak before being identified, what happens if I find out who they are before the system does? That night, I arrived for my shift with a plan. 3 bodies lay waiting. 2 men, 1 woman, all unidentified. I started with the woman, Jane Doe. No documents. Apparently homeless. Found in an alley near Union Station. Even before I got close, I heard it. She's going to fall. I stopped. Who's going to fall? She's going to fall. On Tuesday. Tuesday. In 3 days, I approached the bag. The voice continued. Stairs. 10th floor. Broken glass. My heart raced. It wasn't about me this time. It was about someone else. I opened the bag. The woman was about 60 years old. Her face was marked by the streets. Her clothes were dirty. But her lips seemed to move slightly. Impossible. She was dead. I checked her vital signs. I quickly closed the bag. I went to the second body. John Doe, young man, overdose in the old town. He won't break. The voice was different, deeper, hoarse. Friday, 4:30, Burnside Bridge. I wrote everything down on a piece of paper. My hands were trembling. Third body, John Doe, middle-aged man. Heart attack at Powell's Books. She's going to pull the trigger. No. Monday night, Yellow House. I put down the pen. I looked at the 3 bags, all sealed, all motionless, all dead. But everyone was whispering about the future. I spent the entire night researching. I tried to match the descriptions to real people. Stairs, 10th floor, broken glass. I looked for buildings in Portland, businesses, apartments, nothing concrete. Burnside Bridge, Friday at 4:30, accident, suicide. Yellow House, second, trigger. I couldn't sleep again. On Tuesday, I called the hospital to ask for time off. I needed to know. I needed to confirm if it was real. I spent the day scouring online news, radio, social media, and at 3 in the afternoon, he appeared. Woman dies after falling downstairs in a commercial building downtown, 10th floor. Window glass shattered during the fall. My cell phone fell out of my hand. It was real. That was real. The voices were predicting deaths. I ran to the bathroom and threw up again. My head was spinning. I had heard it. I knew it. And I did nothing. Could I have alerted someone? The police? The hospital? And what can we say? That the dead are whispering about the future. On Friday at 4 in the afternoon, I turned on the TV. I stayed there, waiting. 4:30. Serious accident on Burnside Bridge. 1 dead. Driver couldn't brake in time. I turned off the TV. I leaned my head against the wall. And then, I remembered Yellow House, second, trigger. There was still time. But what was the point of having time? I didn't even know who he was, or where he was. I spent the weekend in utter despair. I tried calling the morgue, asking someone to check the bodies. But what would I say? Monday has arrived. I went to work early, 6 in the afternoon. I needed to hear it again. I needed more details. I arrived. I went down to the morgue. 3 new bodies were waiting. But when I opened the door, all the drawers were open, all the bags empty. And in the middle of the hallway, a new bag, sealed, with a tag hanging from it. I approached slowly. I read the name, and my world crumbled. Because the name was my ex-wife's name. There was no body inside. I opened the zipper, my hands trembling so much I could barely grip the metal. Empty. Just the cold, black plastic, with the chemical smell of the morgue clinging to it. But the label was there. Her full name, date of birth, and a date of death. Today, Monday, 10 o'clock at night. I looked at the clock on the wall. 9:40, 20 minutes. I picked up my cell phone. My hands were trembling. I dialed her number. It rang. It rang. Voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I texted, "Where are you? Please reply." Nothing. I ran to the parking lot. I got in the car. I drove like a maniac through the streets of Portland. She still lived in the same apartment, north side, 15 minutes away. Each red light felt like an eternity. I thought about calling the police. But what could I say? That an empty body bag had her name on it, that the voices of the dead predicted the future. They were going to arrest me or have me committed. I arrived at the building at 10:07. I ran up the stairs to the 3rd floor. I knocked on the door. Nothing. I knocked again. "Sarah! Sarah! Come on!" Silence. I tried the doorknob. Locked. I pressed my ear against the door, and I heard a whisper. It wasn't her voice. It was the voice from the morgue. "You arrived late." No. I kicked the door, once, twice. On the third time, the lock gave way. I went in. The room was dark, silent. It smelled of stale coffee and cigarettes. Sarah! I went to the bedroom. Empty. Bathroom. Empty. Kitchen. And then I saw the back door, open, leading to the fire escape. I ran over there. I looked down. She was there, sitting on the last step, head in her hands, an empty medicine bottle beside her. Sarah. I hopped down the stairs 2 at a time. I got close to her. I picked up the bottle. Antidepressants. Empty. She slowly raised her head. Red eyes, pale face. Why are you here? I just knew you needed me. She laughed. A bitter laugh. Tired. You were never there when I needed you. I called an ambulance. It took them 10 minutes to arrive. They took her to St. Mary's, the same hospital where I work. I stayed in the waiting room until 4 in the morning. The doctor came out. He said she was going to be fine. Gastric lavage. Observation. Psychological support. She was going to survive. I left there when the sun began to rise. I went straight to the morgue. I went downstairs. I opened the door. The bag was still there, in the middle of the hallway, but the label had changed. Her name had been crossed out, and now it had another name. The Mai. No date of death, just awaiting. I approached slowly. I put my hand on the bag. It was cold, empty, but when I put my ear to it, I heard my own voice, whispering, "You should never have listened." I stepped back. I looked around. The drawers, the cold storage rooms, the endless hallway. I realized something. Ever since I started hearing the voices, I've never been afraid of the dead again. I was afraid of myself, from what I knew, from what I heard, from what I carried with me. And now, my name was on a label. Waiting. I don't know when it will happen. I don't know how. But I know that one day, I'll end up here, inside a black bag, whispering secrets to someone who works alone, in the middle of the night, in the silence. And perhaps that person will hear it too, because now I understand. The voices do not come from the dead. They come from those who are imprisoned between the end and oblivion, and me. I've been in prison for a long time already. Something happened to me, and to this day I can't understand it. I work in a morgue, night shift, from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, alone. Most people find that scary, but for me it's always been the opposite. The dead don't judge, they don't ask questions, they don't pretend to care. The morgue is located in the basement of County General Hospital, somewhere in the American Midwest, that it doesn't matter which location to name. Walls of yellowish-white tile, fluorescent lighting that flickers occasionally, and that constant hum of industrial refrigerators, 12 stainless steel drawers, a smell of formaldehyde, and something older, heavier. My job is simple. I receive the bodies that arrive at night, catalog them, store them, and organize the paperwork. The medical examiners do the heavy lifting during the day. I just take care of things. I keep everything in order. The problem is the silence. It's not normal silence. It's dense, oppressive. The kind of silence that presses on your eardrums and makes you hear your own blood pumping. I tried using headphones, but something about it felt wrong, like I was ignoring something important. I tried turning on the old radio in the break room, but it only picked up static. It was on a Tuesday, around 2 in the morning, that I started. I had just received a body. A man, 50-something, heart attack at home. Nothing special. I filled out the paperwork, put the tag on the big toe, and slid drawer number 7 back into place. And then, just out of boredom, just to hear a voice, even if it was my own. I picked up the preliminary report and started reading it aloud. Male victim, approximately 54 years old, found lying on his back in the kitchen of his residence. My voice echoed off the cold walls. It sounded strange, clinical, but it broke the silence. I kept reading. Probable cause of death. Medical history. Each word sounded like an inverted prayer, a pointless ritual. When I finished, the silence returned. But it felt different, less empty, as if something had been heard. I shook my head. Tiredness, loneliness, playing tricks on my mind. I threw the report on the pile and went to make another reheated coffee. But that night, for the first time in months, I didn't feel completely alone. And that feeling should have scared me. After that night, it became a habit. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was more like filling a void. Every time I received a new body, after cataloging and storing it, I would take the report and read it aloud. Sometimes sitting in the old swivel chair at my station, sometimes standing, leaning against the cold wall. At first, I just wanted to hear a human voice. Mine. Anything to break that silence that seemed to suck the air out of my lungs. But after a week, something changed. It was Thursday, 3:30 in the morning. Rain beating against the high basement windows, those little windows at street level that only show car tires passing by. I had just received a young woman. Overdose. Still a pretty face, despite the bluish pallor. I put the body in drawer number 3 and retrieved the report. I started reading. Female victim, approximately 26 years old, found unconscious in the bathroom of a shared apartment. Signs of recent opioid use. Dilated pupils. Cyanosis of the lips. That's when I saw it. Her fingers. They contracted it. Not much. Just a small spasm. The pinky and ring fingers of my left hand, which were sticking out of the drawer because I had been careless when closing it. I stopped reading. I just stared at her hand. Nothing. I swallowed hard. The chill of death, I thought, or gas. Post-mortem spasms are normal in the first few hours. I continued reading, but more slowly, observing. Needle marks on the right forearm. History of... The fingers contracted again. This time, I saw it clearly, all of them, as if she were trying to close her hand. I dropped the report. My heart raced. I stood there, breathing shallowly, staring at that pale hand dangling out of the steel drawer. 5 minutes, 10, nothing happened. A coincidence? I murmured to myself. I said. Just a coincidence. But I knew it wasn't. 2 days later, it happened again. Elderly man. Stroke. Drawer number 9. I was reading his report. Details about the preliminary autopsy. Brain damage. History of hypertension. When I heard it, a muffled sound. As they escaped, I stopped. Silence. I continued reading. The sound is back, clearer now. It came from drawer 9. I walked over there. My hands were trembling. I gripped the cold doorknob and slowly pulled out the drawer. The body was there, motionless, covered up to the neck with the white sheet. But his mouth, it was slightly open. It wasn't like that when I put it there. I'm absolutely sure. I always check. I always close my jaw carefully before covering my face. Now it was open. Just a centimeter. As if he were about to speak. I closed the drawer too quickly. The sound of the metal clanging echoed down the empty hallway. I stood there, leaning against the cold wall, trying to control my breathing. I picked up the report that had fallen on the floor, and I realized something. I had stopped reading exactly when I described the cause of death. Exactly when I mentioned that he had died of suffocation, unable to breathe on his own. And his mouth opened, as if it were trying to breathe. That night, I didn't read anything else, but the silence returned, and it was worse than before. Much worse, because now I knew they were listening. I spent 4 nights without reading anything aloud. 4 nights trying to convince myself that it was all a coincidence. Muscle spasms, release of gas, perfectly normal post-mortem phenomena that any morgue technician knows. But the loneliness returned in full force. The silence was unbearable. Each second dragged on. The hum of the refrigerators seemed louder. The rain outside sounded like fingernails scratching metal. I counted the minutes until my shift ended, but they stretched like hours. On the 5th night, I couldn't take it anymore. I had just received a teenager, car accident, severe head trauma, face intact, but the skull, I won't describe it. I put him in drawer number 5. I got the report. I stared at those printed letters, feeling the weight of the paper between my fingers. Nothing will happen, I said to myself. You're tired, too lonely, making things up. I started reading, quietly, almost whispering. Male victim, 17 years old, found trapped in the wreckage of a vehicle model. Nothing happened. I continued, a little louder. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, significant loss of... That's when I heard it. A wet sound, like liquid dripping. I stopped reading. The sound continued. Ping, ping, ping. It came from drawer 5. I walked over there. Each step echoed. My breathing was uneven. I grabbed the doorknob. I pulled. The boy's body was there, exactly as I had left it, but from the corner of his left eye. A tear was rolling down her cheek. No, not a tear. A thin trickle of clear liquid, sliding down her pale temple, wetting the sheet. No, I whispered. No, no, no. I touched his face with my fingertips, cold, rigid, dead, but the tear was there, fresh, real. I closed the drawer slowly, trying not to make a sound, as if it mattered. I went back to my post. I sat down. My hands were shaking so much that I dropped my pen twice. Condensation, I thought. Air humidity, temperature difference. But I knew it wasn't. I stopped reading for another 3 days. But with each passing hour, the morgue seemed more empty, not physically, emotionally, as if something had gone away, as if I had disappointed someone. I started hearing things, small things, subtle things, metallic creaking sounds coming from the drawers, muffled sighs, steps that didn't exist. And then, on the 8th night, I took a test. There were 2 bodies there, a middle-aged man, an elderly woman. I took the man's report. I stood in the center of the room and read it, but only mentally, just moving my lips, no sound. Nothing happened, so I read it aloud. Male victim, 48 years old. His drawer rattled, just a little, but it shuddered. My stomach turned to ice. I picked up the woman's report. I read it silently again. Nothing. Then, out loud, female victim, 71 years old. Her drawer made a sound, like an exhalation, a long, tired sigh. I dropped the reports on the floor. It was real. My voice was doing it. It didn't matter what I read. It didn't matter to whom. When I read aloud, something awakened. Something in the bodies. Or something using them. I stood there, alone in the middle of that cold basement, surrounded by 12 steel drawers, knowing that inside each one there was someone who was listening. And for the first time since I started working there, I felt genuine fear, because I realized something even worse. I couldn't stop. The loneliness was too much, and they kept me company. If this made you uncomfortable, wait for the next chapter. I continued reading. Every night, every new body, I no longer pretended it was out of boredom. I needed it, like an addict needs their fix. The feeling that someone was listening, even if they were dead, was better than that absolute emptiness. The reactions intensified, fingers clenching, mouths opening, tears, sometimes a guttural sound, as if coming from deep within the chest. Once, I swore I saw a man's chest rise, just once, like an involuntary breath. But I kept going, because out there, in real life, I was invisible. Nobody cared. Nobody asked how I was. But here they listened to me. They reacted. They responded. Until one Tuesday, at 3 a.m, everything changed. I was organizing the paperwork at my station when I saw it. A brown envelope. New. Too clean. It was on top of the stack of reports, but I was sure, absolutely sure. It hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. I had just checked. I picked up the envelope. No label, no stamp, just a handwritten number in the upper corner. 13. We don't have drawer 13, only 12. Open the envelope. Inside, a report, standard format, white paper, everything correct, except for the victim's name. It was mine. My full name, my age, my date of birth. I felt the ground disappear from beneath my feet. They caused death. Asphyxia caused by unknown presence, clear signs of struggle, petechiae around the eyes, pressure marks on the neck, but no identifiable fingerprints. Victim found in the County General Hospital morgue, basement, at 4:17 a.m. The projected date was at the top. In 3 days. 3 days. That's a joke. Yes, I whispered, but my voice was trembling. Someone is doing this to me. Someone. I looked around. The morgue was empty, silent. The security cameras hadn't worked for months. I grabbed my cell phone. No signal. As always in the basement, I tried the door. Locked. No, I murmured, turning the doorknob forcefully. No, no, no. Locked from the inside. The key was on my desk. I had locked it myself when I arrived. Standard procedure. But now, it wouldn't open. The lights flickered. Once, 2, and then a mechanical sound, loud, metallic. All 12 drawers in the cold storage room opened at the same time, all sliding out slowly, as if pulled by invisible hands. I was paralyzed. The bodies were there. 6 men, 4 women, 2 teenagers, all covered with white sheets. But then, one by one, they started to sit down, slowly. Rigid movements, abnormal, like poorly controlled puppets. The sheets slipped from their faces, eyes closed, mouths open, grayish-blue skin, all facing my direction, and then, like a distorted chorus, a collective whisper filled the room. Leia. My heart almost stopped. Read your... I backed up until my back hit the cold wall. The report was still in my hand. I could feel the paper crumpling between my trembling fingers. Leia. No, I managed to say. I am not going. But then I felt it. Something cold. Touching the back of my neck like fingers. Long, cold, pressing lightly. I turned my head. Nothing. But the feeling persisted. The presence was there. Behind me. Invisible. Heavy. The report slipped from my hands. It floated in the air for a second. Impossible, but real. And then landed on the ground. The pages started turning on their own, slowly, as if someone were reading them. The bodies remained seated, motionless, waiting, and I knew it. I knew what they wanted. They wanted to hear me read my own death. My knees gave way. I fell face down onto the cold floor, my hands flat on the icy tiles. The report was there, right in front of me. Pages open, my name printed in crisp black letters. The presence behind me didn't move, but I could feel it, waiting, patiently, as if it had all the time in the world. The bodies in the drawers remained seated, 12 pairs of closed eyes, all pointed at me. Mouths open in empty expressions, but the whispering had stopped. Now there was only silence, that dense silence, oppressive, the kind that hurts your ears. I picked up the report with trembling hands, so much so that I almost tore the paper. "Don't do that." A voice in my head was screaming. "Don't read it. If you read it, it will happen. It will become real." But another part of me, the part that had started all this, the lonely and broken part, whispered differently. "Maybe it's already real. Maybe you're just delaying the inevitable." I looked at the words, "male victim." My mouth dropped open, and I started reading, out loud. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stop. Male victim, 31 years old, found in the County General Hospital morgue at 4:17 a.m. Cause of death: asphyxiation by unknown presence. My voice echoed off the walls, and as I was reading, I felt it. My body started to feel heavy, cold. It's as if the blood has stopped circulating. I continued reading. Obvious signs of struggle. Petechiae in the eyes indicating severe oxygen deprivation. Pressure marks on the neck, but no identifiable fingerprints. My throat started to tighten. I instinctively put my hand to my neck. Nothing there. But the sensation of pressure was real, like invisible fingers closing around the trachea. The victim showed signs of extreme terror at the time of death. Facial expression suggests he saw something. I tried to stop reading, but my mouth kept moving. The words came out on their own, as if someone else were using my voice. Toxicological analysis, negative. No substances found. Psychiatric history, none. Last recorded activity, reading autopsy reports aloud during the night shift. My lungs started to burn. I tried to breathe. I couldn't. No air could get in. I fell sideways onto the floor, still holding the report, still reading because I couldn't stop. Final observations. The victim appears to have died reading their own autopsy report. Original cause remains unknown. Unprecedented phenomenon. My vision began to darken at the edges. The bodies in the drawers leaned forward, slowly, as if they wanted to see better. The figure behind me finally moved. I felt something cold. It wasn't air. It wasn't fabric. It was something impossible to describe. Brush against my face. And then, right next to my ear, a voice. It wasn't human, but he had words. "Continue." I was almost fainting. Almost. I looked at the last line of the report. Time of death, 4:17 a.m. I turned my head, with what little strength I had left, and looked at the digital clock on the wall. 4:16 min. 1 minute. I tried to scream. I tried to drop the paper. I tried to crawl to the door. But my body no longer obeyed. I felt the cold take over everything. Fingers, arms, chest. The bodies in the drawers smiled. All at the same time. Impossible smiles. Mouths that are too big. Too many teeth. And at the last second, at the exact moment the clock changed to 4:17 a.m., I stopped reading. In the middle of a word. Silence. Absolute. I woke up on the floor. Daylight streaming in through the tall windows. 7:15 in the morning. The shift was over. All the drawers were locked. The report was no longer there. I searched the entire morgue. Nothing. As if it had never existed. But my neck. My neck still hurts. And when I look in the mirror, I see marks. Purple. Thin. Like fingers. I still work here. I don't know where else to go. I have nothing left. But now, I don't read anything aloud anymore. Never again. Because I know. I haven't finished reading it. And maybe, just maybe, this must have saved me. Or just postponed. I don't know. What I know is, if you're listening to this, if you've made it this far, please, never read anything aloud where the dead can hear, because they listen, and when they hear, they respond. If you listen to the end, you're already one of us. Subscribe so you don't miss the next whisper.